Hello and welcome to episode 146 of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by Pittsburgh's finest euphonium player. Actually, I doubt that's true. Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you?
At times, I would have said I was in the top three. Thank you.
I have
Wonderful.
a very unique plug for our YouTube channel, which is still pretty new, although we've had a whole bunch of people subscribe, which is awesome. I want you to watch the very end of this episode as I'm signing off because I went to hit stop and I looked in the wrong corner of Zoom and I didn't see the recording icon. And I kept talking. I didn't stumble, but you could see there's a little bit of tension in my face because I thought that I was going to have to tell, luckily, my good friend, Mike Roylance, that I had failed to hit record. But it turns out I had. Everything was fine. But you can see the math. This is all happens in the last literally second and a half of the episode. But I would, if I were you, I would go to YouTube to check that out because Lance saw it on my face. And yeah, that's how we start the bonus episode, by the way, if you're a Patreon patron for next week, as you hear me say, guess what? Yeah. So anyway. Luckily, because I'm a professional, I hit record. I recorded an episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician 2 weeks ago, and I did not hit record. And then I got to the end to hit stop, and it was like a 22-minute like solo episode, and I nailed it. And I went to hit stop, and I realized I had never hit record. It gets better. It was like 11:15 p.m. I'm kind of toast, but I needed to get it done to get it to Will Houchin, our partner, and who's the producer. Go upstairs, eat a bowl of cereal, check the teeth, come back down. I then record the thing again. I get a message the next day from Will saying, we have a problem. There's no audio with, I recorded the second one and my mic had been plugged. So I then had to record it a third time. And that one took me like 4 attempts. So I recorded that episode like 6 times. Good times, man. See, this is Lance laughing. He doesn't care.
Was it about being prepared? That would have been even better. It was about troubleshooting.
We just spoke with Mike Roylance. Amazing.
Very cool. Yeah, great guy.
And Lance had never met him before.
Yeah.
He's great. There's an energy. Well, he said that he's an eternal optimist, and he is. There's just like this energy and a positivity about the guy that he's awesome. He's been hosting for a few people. He's been hosting this weekly tuba hang, which is on Thursday mornings, and it's not a great time for me family-wise, so I've only hopped on a few of them. But boy, it's been awesome to get to see like Roger Bobo, and because we're so isolated, and like to hear Gene Picorni laughing, and to see Rex Martin, and and to see Mike, and to meet some other people from around the world that I haven't known. Has been great. The first one of those that I hit was like really therapeutic. It was like, very early on. There's been a lot of them. It's 20 something at this point of these hangs. He started right when it started. So anyway, good stuff. So you were worried you weren't going to like him. Did you end up, was it okay?
Yeah, he was fine.
Very quickly, I wanted to announce that I have launched something called Hitz Academy. If you go to hitzacademy.com, I am offering tuba lessons, but not traditional tuba lessons. These are not weekly. Go to hitzacademy.com to find out if you sign up for one of, there's 2 options. It's charged monthly. You get access to all tuba-related pedal note media events, like future. We had a trumpet workshop yesterday that was amazing. There's going to be tuba ones of those. That all comes with it. There's a lot of really exciting stuff, and there's going to be limited availability, and it is going to be audition/interview is what's I'm going to try and be pretty finicky about who I choose. I'm looking for curious people who are looking to explore how to operate the tuba, but also all aspects of being a musician. So if that sounds interesting to you, then I will put you in touch with someone who can help you with those things. No, I'm not the middleman. I'm like the end person there. But that's hitzacademy.com. I'm very excited about that. Actually, I already have a few people who've signed up. And last thing is Patreon, right? Go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, and you can get access to bonus episodes with a whole bunch of Knucklehead tuba players, if you're a tuba fan here, for Mike Roylance, and a bunch of other folks. So, anything else, Lance?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm about to eat shrimp and grits. How about that?
I don't know what I'm going to go eat.
Problem is that I offered to make my wife dinner, so I have to go upstairs and cook it.
I made some hummus earlier that was quite good. I might have some of that.
There you go.
We'll see.
Hummus is good.
Hummus is good.
There you go. You know who else is good?
Who?
Mike Roylance.
He was a really nice guy. I shouldn't make fun, but I can't help it. It's genetic.
Without further ado, let us get to the conversation that we had with the Boston Symphony Orchestra's Mike Roylance. Wait, did I hit record? What? Oh. And today on the podcast, we are joined by the principal tuba. It's not the second tuba. It's not the third tuba. It's not the fourth tuba. It's the principal tuba of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Mike Roylance. Mike, how are you?
Great. How you guys doing?
Well, good. Until right before we went on, he said, "Hey, Lance, are you the brains of the operation?" I'm assuming that must be the case. That was
I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking.
Anything like that.
I thought we were friends, man. That hurt my feelings.
We're off on a bad foot because we've already aggravated your 7-year-old.
What interview is this again? I forget.
This is an audit, actually. We'd like to see your tax returns for the last 7 years, please.
Yeah, we're professional podcasters. We would appreciate it if you took this more seriously.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
we're the premier podcast of people who quit Boston Brass or from, right? I mean, I don't think there's a better one.
Yeah.
I think we're the only ones. But anyway, we've wanted you on the show for a long time, and you're busy. We're busy, but we finally made it happen. You played a gig today. Tell us about that to start with.
Well, it was sort of a gig. Every September the Pops, so the Boston Symphony and the Boston Pops are basically the same with a different color bow tie. And, we every September at matriculation, is that the beginning of the school? Yeah, for Boston College, they always have the Pops come out and play a big show, a big fundraiser thing, and obviously none of that's going to happen this year. So we, about 8 years ago now, we recorded this piece that John Williams wrote for the 100th anniversary of Fenway Park called Fanfare for Fenway, and so today we did filming with the brass and percussion at various locations on BC's campus. So we mimed it, but it's hard to resist to play. We haven't had our last performance was March 13th, I believe. So it's basically been 6 months, and today was the first day back, and it was pretty interesting to see the reindeer games come right back into play, and So it was a 3-hour hit, and it seemed like forever because we haven't. Who's done a 3-hour gig in 6 months? So
Right. Yeah.
Cumulatively.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a few hours more than I've had. Yeah, in 6 months. This. I have seen. I've attended at least one concert, and usually many, many, many more than that every single summer at Tanglewood since 1975, and this was the first summer. In almost 20 years now that I didn't get to see you play the tuba at Tanglewood, and the first time in my life in 45 years that I didn't get to see anything at Tanglewood, which is these are first world problems, right? I've got my health, but that makes me sad.
Yeah, well, you understand what's important, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I'm kind of thankful for my health,
Roylance,
but
family, health.
Well, it's pretty interesting, The BSO there was a big financial impact study done, I think 2 years ago now, and where they determined the financial impact on the Berkshires from Tanglewood is roughly $150 million a year. We get, I think the traffic is about 350,000 annually just in the Tanglewood. And so, I mean, the whole Berkshires is just, I mean, well, you've been there. It's just like it is during February. It's just a ghost town, and
Right.
it's sad. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's there's so many. I mean, there's Jacob's Pillow for dance, and there's Shakespeare and Company, and there's the Clark Institute for Art. But it does seem like there's a whole lot of people who end up going to the Berkshires for Tanglewood, and then they frequent all of those other places as a result. So yeah, it was weird. There was like nobody, and I went up a few times. I didn't make it to Lenox, but there's just nobody around. I mean, understandably, there's so many. Yeah, it's really, really sad. What is the situation with the Boston Symphony right now? Like, is there a concert that's on the books that like may or may not happen, or is it just officially in a wait and see?
not at all. Not at all. There's the state mandate here in Massachusetts is no crowds larger than 25 at the moment. Even though the numbers have been really low here, and we started out on the converse of that, where
Right.
Massachusetts was on fire,
Yeah.
and thankfully it's things are keeping down. We'll see how the influx of college students, and return to school affects that, because there's a lot of in-school classes happening, and but the orchestra is officially, as far as scheduled concerts are down through Thanksgiving, which is usually the point of the year where we transition into the holiday pops anyway. So
Sure.
that's just their way of sort of wiping that slate clean. There are um, people, qualified people, I guess, uh, committees. Committees that are there's a reopening committee. There's all sorts of committees, but there's been a special committee formed just to be just to kind of figure out how we can get things going sooner if possible. And it's tough because you look at, I don't know if you caught the live stream of the Concertgebouw last week, but they did a live concert with our conductor,
Right.
with Nelson's, and
Right.
I think it was a Rachmaninoff Symphony 2 or something like that, and it was just wonderful to watch and hear that. And so all across Europe, concerts are happening, and with that tuba chat thing I do on Thursdays, I've been able to talk to people directly in Vienna and Germany and in Japan. And everything's getting back to normal, and it's just it's frustrating. I guess the biggest issue is with our organization coming onto concerts is what's called what's it called? It's when you have a pool in the backyard without a fence. It's an invited
Oh,
danger or something like that, unintended danger or something,
yes.
and so legally, I guess it's the insurance companies
Insurance
that are
writers.
strong arming the BSO, saying no, you cannot.
Hmm.
Um, so
Wow.
we'll see. There's talk of us doing 25 people or less concerts, and capturing them on video, and then sending them up, via stream somewhere. They invested about 3 years ago, and there's 4K cameras all around the hall, and there's a video and sound production booth that they've been capturing for archival purposes for years. So all the equipment is there, and you know the knowledge and experience is there. So we could do it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I personally don't foresee. I'm hoping for next Tanglewood, honestly.
Yeah, that's kind of my best case scenario too. For it seems like, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're both wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my most memorable times during this entire ordeal was, I guess it was maybe 3 weeks ago now. I did a class on Zoom for Mahidol University over in Bangkok, and right at the end of the call, after the Joe Bowman thanked me, and then he reminded the students. He said, "And just remember that you are all required to go to the wind ensemble concert tonight." And then he said, "I'll see you all then," and then hung up. And I was just like, I'm in my basement, and they're
Right.
like, there's not only wind ensemble happening, but there's wind ensemble happening with a crowd, and
Right.
yeah, it's kind of wild how this is affecting different parts of the world. Well, it's affecting all parts of the world the same. It's just kind of different responses to it. Is what it seems like. But
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you think? Here's a crystal ball question. Like, what kinds of long-term impact do you suspect, or fear, or predict?
if you're wrong, by the way, we're going to play the clip in the future, and we'll mock you. So
I think without it, I mean, if you think about it, there's only a few instruments that are really celebrated as soloistic instruments, and without a doubt, the euphonium is going to take over.
That's what I'm counting on.
when you had no reaction to me saying if you get this wrong we're going to mock you in the future, I knew something good was coming. Yeah, I was like, yeah, oh no, he's in his windup. I stepped in the way. You go. That was good. Anyway,
so hold on. In the show notes, it's going to say euphonium will take its rightful place.
Well,
we lost you for a second.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, and from what my friends tell me in Vienna and Germany and in Japan, that people are extremely eager. Once they came back online and concerts were scheduled, the tickets would sell out in 5 minutes because people are just dying to come to these shows. And
different choice of words, man. Different choice of words.
Yeah, well, right. So there's definitely interest out there, and a lot of people say that putting out content online for free is going to destroy people wanting to go to concerts, and I sort of see the flip side of that, where that will only entice the person to actually spend or to invest in a live concert, and I can't see this being anything but positive. The negative side to this is just going to be the degradation of orchestras or ensembles that are already on the financial, cliff. So if they're there right now, it just depends. I mean, there's several orchestras out there that are, not top tier orchestras, but have managed to pay full scale through the whole season and are coming back, full tilt with minimal, it's so unique to every geographical area, and it all depends on the circle of influence they have within the donor level community.
Yeah. Well, I saw an interesting stat the other day. No. I mean, it's nobody knows, but I saw a statistic that said that there's a much stronger appetite for a younger demographic to go back to live concerts. Much less enthusiasm for the older demographics, which historically is where symphony orchestras make their bread and butter. And what I wonder is if I've been soapboxing forever that my personal belief is that professional orchestras should take a lesson from professional sports and allow way more options for enjoying the art than requiring that people show up at a certain time at a certain place to do a certain thing in a certain way. And what I wonder now is if there is a growing comfort or you getting used to the fact that I might be only able to enjoy this thing virtually, then it probably is going to be in orchestra's best interest to keep the people who might be nervous coming out, keep providing them value and content, because those are also the people who tend to write the big checks and they remember you when. Right. So I'm hopeful that this will actually put more seats at the table. You're limited to how many butts you can get in seats at that hall on any given night. And if this gets people used to enjoying it in a variety of different ways, it can be that it is the case that it's horrible right now, but it could be that it comes out the other side with a whole bunch of new revenue streams. That's what I'm hoping for the industry.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the undenying truth is that this is pushing orchestra after orchestra into embracing technology like they've never done before. And whether or not it was because they were fearful of the technology or just didn't have the right people in place to embrace the technology, I think that the orchestras that survive, which I think will be the overwhelming majority, I think they're all going to be better equipped going forward to reach more people. So I'm grabbing my daughter's phone here because it's making noise and it's driving me crazy. So sorry about that.
As long as you're sorry.
Well, it's one of those things too, where one of the big digs on American orchestras has been the lack of reliance on earned income, on ticket sales. And that's actually been kind of the saving grace. Like if you were living hand to mouth off of ticket sales, this would be a very different conversation for a lot of orchestras.
Well, I mean, even the BSO's annual revenue, our annual operating budget is just north of $100 million a year, and just over half is from ticket revenue.
Which is high.
That gives you an idea of how much earned income there. Yeah, but I guess I was talking to one of our bass players who's been in the orchestra since he predated Chester Smith, so I'm going to say he joined in 1962, and so I don't know what president was in office then. It was pre-Kennedy, I think. If that's not, I forget when Kennedy took office, but he was saying that the split back then was closer to 70% came from ticket revenue. So yeah.
Yeah, I think most of your colleagues are in the 40s. I mean, to be above 50, I think
Really?
is newsworthy. I think it's crazy.
I can't figure out how to turn this thing off.
This is awesome. I like that this was a conversation about orchestras being forced to embrace technology.
I'm still here.
And now I'm going to write tuba players being forced.
Now,
literally.
I'm disappointed that we didn't hit record earlier, because you guys were getting really deep. That Roylance was close to Lance, and it was just a Roy separating you, and there was some real Mensa level stuff going on before we hopped on.
We look a lot alike.
It's true. There's kind of eerily.
Very handsome guy.
What's your mom's name?
Gina.
So on a more serious note, before we get too far into this,
more serious than his mother.
Well, I guess it's a little bit more pertinent right now, because I was going to talk about the passing of Connie Weldon, who was actually Mike's teacher, and for anyone who doesn't know her, she was a pioneer and a legend. She also taught Sam Palafian. She taught James Jenkins. But I'll let Mike tell you a little bit more about her, and then if we could just hear what it was like to study with you what was it like teaching Connie? No, I think it was the other way around. And just thoughts on her passing and her legacy.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't know of Connie prior to going to University of Miami. I auditioned for and to study with John Stevens. I went down there and here's John Stevens, with his look, and he has his brown leather satchel. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and we're talking 40 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago, or whatever it was, 35 years ago. And anyway, I auditioned for him and got a scholarship, and I go down there. First week of school is all orientation, and I go into Gussman Concert Hall, which is the big hall there. Freshman music there, and whoever's talking is talking, the deans and whatnot. And then this tiny person came up to me, and Connie was not gifted with height. She was a rather short person. I mean, I would give her maybe 5'2" at tops. She was maybe broke 5 foot. And she, anyway, this lady comes up to me. I had no idea who she was, and said, "Hi, are you Mike Roylance?" And I looked down at her, and I'm 17. I was young and as dumb. I know it's hard to believe, but as they get.
Wait, give me a second to try and picture this.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I look, all pimply faced, sweaty from being outside in Miami, and she says, "I'm Dean Weldon. I'm Constance Weldon. I'm assistant dean here, and I have some unfortunate news that Professor Stevens resigned from the university last week because he's taken the position at Wisconsin. That's when he started at University of Wisconsin, and I'll be teaching you instead. And if this was pre Al Gore, so there were no interwebs, so I couldn't Google her. I didn't know who she was, so I didn't understand that the fame or the history that the University of Miami Tuba Ensemble had gained during her time, and I didn't know that she was the first female in the Boston Pops. I didn't know that she was the first female tuba fellow at Tanglewood for 2 years. I didn't know that she was a Fulbright scholar. I didn't know that she had gone to Concertgebouw and played a season there as acting principal tuba, and then was in Kansas City Symphony, and then was in the Miami Ballet and the Miami Philharmonic, and I didn't know any of that going into that. And so I started taking lessons from her about once a month, and then they would fly James Jenkins down as well. And Connie was just this wonderful, sweet, patient, very patient, but very compassionate about her students. And she at that point she was living actually in the dorm. They had these buildings where they were experimenting with having faculty have their apartment on like the first floor of these dorms, and so she several times had me over for dinner, but I was too young and very dumb to really appreciate the extended hand, but she wasn't playing anymore at that time. She had suffered a dental injury where I think it severed one of these nerves, and so she hadn't been playing in a while. But her pedagogical knowledge and ability to convey that was just spot on. And I have no idea why she didn't kick me out of the studio. I was pretty. I wouldn't say I was non-responsive. I mean, I had a pulse, but not so much. And it wasn't her doing it all. I went there to study with John. I was practicing 6 hours a day my senior year of high school. I was addicted to practicing, and by the end of my freshman year, I was practicing 2 hours a week, and so that was it. That was my 1 year at University of Miami. Connie was a superstar to me. I mean, she wrote letters of recommendations for me for jobs at Disney, but we stayed in touch after that. I really feel unfortunate that we didn't get a chance to study the whole 4 years. But I don't know. If Al Gore had been a little younger, I would have. Or I had been a little older, maybe. One amazing thing I was able to do. She had recently passed, and this guy. Organized. He was part of the class that had organized. He organized a Zoom session for all of her students to celebrate her, and he invited me on, which I thought was great. I think technically I was her last student because she had basically resigned from teaching several years before, but I got to know all of her students and on that Zoom session, and it was amazing to hear the stories of how great of a teacher she was. And yes, she taught you how to play the tuba, but she was more compassionate I should say more passionate about the students actually having success in whatever they did, which I thought was amazing. So anyway, I got very lucky.
That's awesome.
Long story there. Sorry about that.
Great story, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable that now that we've got all these knowledge boxes in our pocket, if I was that 17-year-old with this phone in my pocket, as soon as she introduced herself, I would just Google her, right? Then you'd immediately see all of the things that she had done. But this is a different time. So, and where did you go to school after that?
Well, let's see. The question should be, where did I not go to school after that? 'Cause it took me 13 years to finish my undergrad. I had four or five different institutions. I went to Seminole Community College right after that, back in Orlando, and got my associate's degree, which was a 2-year degree. I played trombone in the jazz band. My major at University of Miami was officially undeclared, but I was essentially leaning towards music engineering because they had an amazing studio program there, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the first to offer a college degree in it. And so I came back to Orlando. Both my parents were in law, so I was kind of going that direction, and was playing trombone in the jazz band at the community college. And then after that, I went to the University of Central Florida, and was essentially doing a pre-law type of curriculum. I was still playing in the band and the orchestra. Chris Olka was in school with me at the same time, and um, I auditioned for. Well, anyway, those are the schools, and so I quit when I started working at Disney. I left the school, and then I finished my bachelor's degree at a small school called Rollins College, which is also in Orlando, Florida, where Fred Rogers went to school. That's the school's claim to fame. So I would always practice. I practiced thousands of hours in the Rogers room. So.
Pretty good. So where was it that the fire got lit then? If you went from practicing 2 hours a week and now you're doing what you're doing, somewhere along the way there was a spark.
I still hate it. I'm forced to do this, Lance.
Oh, I didn't say you liked it.
That's it. It was sort of one of those things where I never got out of music. I was always still playing in the ensembles and still very connected. I loved it. And to me, for a long time, it was about the connections and the friendships and the people that I met. And then one thing led to another, and I guess the summer of 1988 was when I was in the Disney All-American College Band in Orlando. And I auditioned for that, obviously got into that while I was still at UCF. And that was, to me, that was a huge, if you say fire lighting moment, because I was, for the first time, I was surrounded by great players from all around the country. And I sort of felt that I fit in, but I was so amazed at how incredible that sounded. You go back now and listen to it, it sounds pretty good, but so anyway, I went back to UCF that following fall, and then got a call to audition for the group called the Future Corps, and went in and auditioned for that, and got that, and for the first 5 years of that, I left school. The job paid great. It was 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, 7 shows a day, health benefits, vacation, everything. And I was 20 or 21, and so I left school, and it was great. But it was not. I had not became a serious tuba player or a serious musician even at that point. I mean, it was we did our 5 o'clock set, and then from as soon as we could get there, till we closed happy hour down, the whole band would go to the watering hole on the way home, and that's what we did. So 5 years later, this guy Matt Peterson joined the group, and he had I don't know if you guys know that name, but he was a trumpet player. He had been in the Dallas Brass for a while. This was the first iteration of Dallas Brass after the breakup. When Rhythm and Brass was formed, and so he had done that for a while, and then he came to Orlando, got in our band, and he was sort of the first person that exposed me to thinking outside of the pond. Orlando was a huge employer of musicians at Disney. There were 300 full-time musicians. There were 26 full-time tuba jobs at Orlando, all making $40,000-$50,000 a year, or maybe 35, 40. But that was a lot of money back then, and it's in Orlando. Anyway, he exposed me to he was a big fan of New York Philharmonic. We went up and got to go see New York Philharmonic rehearsal. Everybody to this point in my life had been pretty much Chicago oriented, and it's just you asked that question about lighting the fire. That Matt Peterson was key. He was in the group for about a year, and then he left. And that's when I started taking lessons from Gene. That's when I started taking lessons back with James Jenkins, and started finding out how to audition and how to, I was a great commercial player. I played bass as well, but even the greatest commercial players are found out in the classical world, because it's a very it's a very specific way of playing a dotted 8/16 pattern, and in the commercial world, there's a lot of ways that are acceptable, you know, and so when things went south at Disney, and I was playing, so at the sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. That was a long answer to your question. I'll stop.
No, that's okay. No. Well, you can stop. Well, pick it up where you left off. But before you do
Yes,
that,
sir.
I want to tell you about the fantastic folks at the Mary Papper School of Music at beautiful and sunny Duquesne University, which is sunny all the time up on the bluff at Duquesne
That was
University.
smooth, man. That was smooth.
And if you're interested in finding out about who teaches brass at Duquesne, what kinds of things you can do, you should go to the link in the show notes. You'll be taken to a page created specifically for the listeners of the Brass Junkies. And such a special thank you to Jim. He's a special boy Nova for making it possible.
And they actually, just for Brass Junkies listeners, there is something that they call the Roylance plan, which if you pay for 11 years ahead of time, then you can take up to 13 years to finish your degree.
Wow,
So, yeah,
that's nice of them.
yeah, right. It
Well,
is.
that's planned. In the show notes, so it must be true.
Well,
All right, so pick it up where you left off. So, I mean, that's kind of fascinating between the session player versus the legit player, or however you want to,
Yeah,
think of that.
well, so by the end of so 5 years into my Disney career, I really started getting into music, and like I said, I started flying up occasionally to take a lesson from Gene Percorni in Chicago, and I sort of
What year was this, Mike? Like the 5 years in, just approximate?
that would have been mid '90s, so '94, '95 ish.
Okay.
And, so I would fly up to Ravinia and take a lesson with Gene and excuse me. Oh, sorry, it's kind of parched here. Hold on a second. Anyway, he would
He had to pretend playing the tuba for 3 hours today. He's really exhausted.
I remember when he it's like it's one of those eye-opening things, and I played a Rudy Meinl 3/4 C for years because I had seen Charles Villarubia tour with the Dallas Brass, and just sound exquisite. And he was playing a Rudy Meinl 3/4 C with a Schilke Helleberg 2 mouthpiece. So
Guess what? That tuba that you saw him play is right there. Like I own that tuba that he was playing. Yeah.
That's what you're giving me for this interview, right? That's
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
talking about.
absolutely. Yeah, it's yours.
So I, of course, went out and bought one and bought the same mouthpiece, and that was 1987, I think. So I was playing this Rudy Meinl 3/4 C for years, subbing in orchestras. And are we open that for you? For years I was playing that in orchestras and subbing in around area and brass quintets and everything. And I remember I pulled it out of the gig bag in Chicago at Ravinia, and Gene goes, "Oh, what kind of F tuba is that?" And my head kind of sunk, and anyway. But that was sort of eye-opening that was considered a small tuba because I never thought about that. I didn't, it was just a different pond. And anyway, so by the end of the Orlando experience, start fast forwarding. I started taking auditions. I think 1998 is when I bought my inertial. I had auditioned for the Marine Band the year prior to that, made it to the finals. I got my inertial. I auditioned for Oregon Symphony, made it to the finals in that. And this was also at the time when I was doing all this stuff. I had my 7 shows at Disney, and then I would go downtown Orlando at night and play in this Dixieland band called the Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Jazz Band, and it was a full-time Dixieland band that had been there 25 years.
I heard
Wow.
that, man.
And I was the last tuba player to be hired, and it was another full-time band. So I had 2 full-time gigs. So I would do 7 shows in the morning, and then I would start at 4:45. We would do 5 sets, and I would get home at like 12:30 at night.
Wow.
And I did that. I would say that cycle for about 2.5, 3 years. And I was also teaching adjunct at UCF one of those years, and running the pep band at Rollins. So it was a pretty busy time. I had no wife, no life, no kids, nothing. It was just me, and I was basking in music. It was fantastic, and I loved it. And then within about 9 months, the UCF job ended. The Rosie O'Grady's Good Time in Emporium, which was this huge complex called Church Street Station, which they had a Dixieland club, a country western club, and a disco club or pop club. And it got bought out and, raised, and they built something else. And so that gig ended, and then May 11 of that year is when the Disney gig ended. And so I went from, making really fat money, single, to zero in no time at all. And then I had to sort of regroup, and I had, thankfully, I had sort of laid the groundwork. I'd finished my degree. I had gotten inertial. I had been practicing a ton, and I was, so to me it was at that point it was either, is this a family show? Is that what you said? It's a family show.
Absolutely.
Can be or not. It's
You
up
haven't
to you.
met my family.
So basically, I had to either shit or get off the pot. I mean, period. And so I remember I took an audition in Seattle, the one that Chris Oka won, and I bombed, and I know why, but anyway, I didn't do well. And my other passion is aviation. I've been a lifelong fan of flying, and I have an instrument rating. And at that point, I didn't have my license, but had taken many lessons and was, going in that direction. And I was considering a complete career change. And in Seattle is one of the big Boeing manufacturing plants.
Sure.
And, on the way back from Seattle to Olympia, where my dad lived, there's the big Boeing Aviation Museum, which is sort of like Mecca for aviation enthusiasts. I mean, it's just incredible, all the stuff they have. So I spent the whole afternoon sort of commiserating in my loss and taking it as a sign that, clearly I'm not meant to be this, and I should do the aviation. So I went back home that night to my dad's house, who was living in Olympia with his wife, and had the long talk and said, look, if I do the aviation thing, it's a 10-month school, it's $40,000. I'm going to walk out with all my ratings, and I'm going to be guaranteed a job, and in 5 years I'll have a 6-figure income, guaranteed. And to me, it was a no-brainer. Or I can do the music thing, and you're 10 times more likely to be a U.S. senator than you are to become a tuba player in the orchestra. And I was thinking that my dad would be like, yeah, I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Mike, and it's a good thing. But he was real quiet, as per usual. And then my stepmom at the time, Donna, who was always generally kind of hands off, she was real, I wouldn't say aggressive, but she was very vocal about saying, you got to do the music thing. You have to do the music thing. You got to do it. Her brother was a pilot, and so she knew the lifestyle of aviation and knew how hard it was. And, the divorce rate is just unbelievable. And, she said, if you become a pilot, you'll never do music again. But if you do music, you can always do flying as a hobby.
It's pretty wise.
It was the last thing I wanted to hear. I was, I left the room. I was, I'm 30 or 31 at the time. I'm not a young kid, but I feel like just going, screaming but I left the next day. I flew home. I put my home in the market in 10 days and sold a car and made plans to audition for DePaul University to go study with Floyd, because at that point Gene wasn't really teaching at any particular school, and but I wanted to go study with Floyd. I mean, his albums, if you haven't heard his solo albums, go get them now. All the Schumann is amazing. And then I didn't get into the Civic. I was on the sub list. And then when I got to Chicago, so I did sell my house and I moved to Chicago. And when I got there, the second day I was there, Jerome Stover, who was also in the studio, got the call to do the Honolulu job for a 1-year job. So he was the Civic guy, and then I sort of defaulted as the second guy. So that's how I got into that. And on a lark. Totally on a lark. Totally undeserved, but I took it. Ran with it. Sorry,
This is a non-traditional path, and there's so many people are
offended.
Disappointed.
Insert dig here, but there's a tenacity there's a through line of tenacity with what you're talking about that's really interesting to me. And the question I have is, what? I mean, there's so many directions we could go. One thing I'm curious about is the differences between a commercial player and a classical player. Another thing I'm interested in is how these two universes that you lived in successfully have made you sort of the perfect guy for the gig that you have now. And did it seem like that at the time? But I guess preliminarily, to what do you attribute this notion that at 31 that this is the thing, like that you weren't going to, it was a non-traditional route, and that doesn't seem to have bothered you, and it certainly doesn't seem to have slowed you down. So why did you do it that way? I mean, like, how come that happened that way? Like, why did this fire to go do what you're doing now really take then in your early 30s?
It was a calculated decision. I mean, it wasn't like, I walked in a field of poppy
Sure.
seeds and came back and said, I'm going to go be in the civic orchestra. No, I had limited success in auditions up to this point, so I knew that I wasn't out of the ballpark. I knew that or at least I thought, and because I'm an eternal optimist, I thought that
There was enough evidence of success that you thought, okay, I'm on a path.
I mean, it's not money not evidence you can take to the bank to get a loan, but it was, to me, it was and the other calculations were, if I were not to do it then, I would miss my window. Because at that point, the armed services, and it wasn't the orchestra route that I wanted, it was just a gig. I just needed a gig.
Yeah.
And my age window was sort of narrowing. I mean, 34, at that point, 34 was the cutoff. I don't know what it is now.
Military bands, yeah.
Yeah, they've raised it a little bit. But
37, maybe 38,
37?
somewhere in there, yeah.
But I was fast approaching that, in the orchestras, you can't discriminate because of age, but they do, and it's not intended discrimination, but if you get candidate A that's 59 years old who plays great, or candidate B who's 23 years old who plays equally as great, what's the corporation going to do? And honestly, in most audition situations, the committee tends to pull for the underdog, if you will, and because people really believe in people's potential. That's at least how I found it to be in auditions. And anyway, if I didn't do it then, I knew I would never do it. And so I just met my wife Amanda. The year that I lost all that work, I was in Orlando. I was freelancing. I was teaching 40 kids. I was doing everything. And she was a middle school band director when we met, and that's how we met, because I started teaching her tuba students. And I remember when we started dating, I was like, I'm just so you know, I'm thinking about leaving in about 4 months, so feel free to shut the door in my face if you want. And then I start explaining to her, the options of doing flight school, which would have meant I stayed in Orlando, or sell everything and move to Chicago. And she said, well, yeah, I think they're pretty difficult. It's not going to be easy. And honestly, that was probably the catalyst that made me say, well, I'm going to do it then. She hates it when I tell that story, because she was it's tough. We just started dating, and it was serious. We got engaged 7 months later, so we knew pretty early on, and so that made the decision that much more tough, because here I am, 31, finally finding, a job is one thing, but when you find your soulmate, that's hard. And so, but anyway, so that's what happened, and I sold everything and moved up to Chicago and lived in Roscoe Village and had a blast. And 2 years later, I ended up here. So, and that was 18 years ago.
So the transition from commercial player to classical player, what would you say the biggest adjustment was, like just in a nuts and bolts sort of a way?
I think the biggest transition from, I mean, there's several, but the biggest is time. Because in the commercial world, time is very specific. It never fluctuates at all. Period. There's a click track, or there's even if the conductor is going, it's solid time. And in the classical world, time is a moving target, and it has to be because that's the enabler of emotion. I'm not the enabler, but one of the big enablers of emotion in music is time and fluctuation of time. So that was a big one. I mean, triplets in the commercial world are triplets, and triplets in the classical world can be like whatever you want. As long as you meet up with whoever you need to meet up with at the same time, it's all good. And I think if one of the things, you talk about my non-traditional route, and I think a lot of people that come up through the conservatory route, and go straight into this career path, I call them blue bloods. That's they're the people that they're so streamlined. And I remember talking to people that were blue bloods, and I remember like I just got a text from a friend of mine in Orlando, this guy Keith Oshiro, and he had just inherited Rich Madison's euphonium. Cool. And I remember, to me, I got to meet Rich Madison. I played with him before. He's great guy. He's long since passed. Great person. And he sent me a picture of it. And it's not even a fancy. It's just an upright 4-valve Yamaha thing. And I was like, man, that is so cool. How cool is that? I remember showing it to some of my my low brass colleagues, and they didn't even know who Rich Madison was. And to me, that says it all right there, because Rich Madison, if you're a euphonium player that's even come close to listening to jazz on euphonium, he's one of the biggest guys. He plays great tuba. And anyway, I think that it's almost like the path of a blue blood has to be so strict and narrow, the lines on the road have to be freshly painted, period, for them to achieve the successes that they do at early ages. Whereas a commercial player, the lines have to be blurred. You really have to. You don't have to be the best at everything, but you have to be proficient at everything. At everything.
Well, and I can't help but think that the fact that you had played 1,000 gigs by the time you were taking these auditions had to be to your advantage. Like you were just my hunch. I don't know you before today. Is my hunch is that you were kind of.
You don't remember me, Lance?
That was you. Wait, do you have a tattoo? Half of a tattoo? If we put it,
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
I had it burned off.
Wait, what was your mother's?
I got the lower end of the stick.
Yeah.
Right. That didn't come out right. Yeah.
So, but my guess is that you were unflappable in the auditions because you'd just been on stage so many. Like, when you're around people who've been on stage thousands of times, there's just this kind of like, there's no messing with them. There's just like you can throw anything in the kitchen sink at them, and they're going to at least be able to handle the pitch in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was tough because I was an unknown quantity. I mean, I was the suspect. I was the kid from the other side of the mountain that Julius Caesar wanted to destroy because he'd never even seen him. But I was from that tribe. And my first, the BSO had 3 years of auditions, and even Seiji Ozawa was known to dislike my resume because he says Disney very, very risky. And so, yeah, everybody looks upon, somebody who plays in Walt Disney World. Like, to me, the people who played and still play in Walt Disney World are some of the most talented people I've ever met. And to this day, because they're so versatile and they're so professional and can handle anything that's, like you said, anything that's thrown at them. So, Yes, that part of it was an advantage, but the hard part was also knowing that
Look,
I'm
look
I,
bad on paper.
all those glares at me were because I'm a suspect, you know.
So, what do you call a trombone player in a three-piece suit? The defendant.
I was going to say overly dressed pizza delivery guy. Well,
I've always considered you the suspect in social situations, but I'm seeing how, yeah. So maybe Ozawa was, yeah.
yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Well, I mean, you know what? I do know that when I was advancing in Boston, you know, it was, you know, there were nerves, absolutely, you know, and I did a lot of training with nerves, you know, with the Don Green books, you know, Performance Success and Audition Success and all that. And priceless, you know, absolute must read books for people that want to go down this path. But I remember walking, you know, making to the, I don't know, semis or finals, and in the BSO in the basement, there's these winger practice rooms that have glass doors, and I could see, you know, you walk by and there's everybody who's everybody, you know, all of these greats from Europe and the greats from the U.S. and they're all in there, and you know, nobody knows me, which was great, you know, but it was intimidating in one regard, but in the other regard, I could hear them all playing, you know, because everybody's running through their excerpts and they're playing extremely well, great time, good pitch, you know, but what I heard as an advantage to me was my musicality, and to me that I thought that came, I still feel that came from all the experience of just playing on the street and just entertaining, you know. I you know, the sense that, you know, it's almost impossible not to improve once you're on the job if you're playing around great people, which
Oh, that's a great quote.
BSO is full. I mean, you've got to be, you just got to be turned off if you're not.
Right.
But to arrive at that position, you know, early on is, anyway, I didn't hear a lot of great musical arches when I walked by those winger rooms, and so that was a boost. But fear was still there. I mean, I think, Andy, I told you my Meistersinger story, you know, and so I was in this, you know, I advanced it around, and this was back, this audition in particular, all the BSO auditions, you didn't know what you were going to play until you finished the previous excerpt, and then they flipped the page, and it was whatever. And anyway, he flipped the page, and it was Meistersinger, the overture, and just the solo section. And you think that would be like a sigh of relief, right? Because that's every tuba player's first excerpt. C major, how hard could that be, right? It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a 2.5 octave, not even a 2.5, just 2 1/3 octave scale. You know, no, not even. Yeah, 2 octave scale, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, anyway, so I'm putting down my F tuba because I think I just played barely or something like that, and I pull up my C, and as I'm pulling up the C tuba, this thought goes into my head, clear as a bell. And you know, my wife and I we were newly married, not pregnant, no kids, not even intending to have kids at that point. And the thought that came through my head was the future of your unborn children depends on how well you play this next excerpt.
I
What a
told this
favor
story.
you did you.
I told this story yesterday at the Brass Junkies Trumpet Workshop, where we did a special winning the audition with Tom Houchin and talking all about, and I talked about how you were in the middle of the round. And anyway, I will let you finish the story, but I literally told this story yesterday about you at our trumpet workshop.
Well, I'm sure they were all like, they were falling asleep when you were mentioning it.
Well, yeah, they were like, we don't know who that is, but anyway, but if there's a cool ending, then great.
Yeah. Well, you know, so I played it, you know, but I remember I had to, you know, think, you know, one of Don Green's methods, and I think this is a very common psychological approach to fear, is that instead of trying to push it off or ignore it, you welcome it. And I remember, you know, doing that. I remember literally saying, "Oh, I was wondering when you were going to show up." And then then I played the Meistersinger, and I played it well. It was fine, you know, and then we moved on. So
Wow.
I definitely one of the other auditions, I definitely had one of my worst ever auditions. It was it was Hungarian March. It was bum 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 ba da 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 ba 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 blah blah blah. bum, 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 beep, bum, 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 bum. And I stop. And I look over at the personnel manager, who was the proctor. I didn't know who he was. He was just the proctor. And he's this guy named Lynn Larson. Great guy. Good friend of mine now, and very, very dry wit. Very smart, very intelligent guy. But you don't know him at all. And stupid me. You're not supposed to say anything, right? So I turned to him and I whisper. I said, "Do you think I should ask to do that again?" and he looks at me like total surprise. He goes, "It's not going to make a difference." Right?
Yeah, man.
What do you do? So I didn't know where to go on. So I just went on. But he's been my personnel manager since that day forward.
You're supposed to play the E right after that, a little late and with a horrible sound and out of tune. You're not supposed to miss those two notes. That's great. It's not going to make a difference. Speaking of not making a difference, thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. See, if Parker Mouthpieces had existed when Mike crapped all over Hungarian March, and he was playing one, maybe the ending would have been different. Yeah, you never know. So,
remind me, I was the proctor for a tuba audition when I was in the Air Force Band, and there was a very funny story that happened. I'll tell on the bonus episode.
There we go. Now we're talking. So I love. We got to bust on Jens here in a second, but I love that story about. I don't remember this specific aspect the first time that I heard you tell it, but when you talked about how you were waiting for that voice to show up, and you said, "Hey, like what took you so long?" And then it's kind of like when you're trying to meditate, and there are different kinds of meditation, but when you're trying to clear your mind, and that when a thought pops into your head, you can get like mad about the thought, and then you can get like mad about allowing yourself to get mad about the thought, and then it's like not super, it's not super calming. Or you can, the analogy that is common that I like is just, it's like the thought's a cloud. It just kind of goes by and then it's gone. It's like, so you said hey to the voice and you're like, let's play the Meistersinger together. That's like, that's great. You didn't fight it. There's a lot of lessons in there.
Well, you lose. You're always going to lose. Yeah.
Right.
So I call it adversity training. I don't know if you guys can appreciate the quote from Stripes. What kind of training are you doing? Army training, sir. Training. But adversity training. So I have this real specific.
That's the fact,
That's
Jack.
Jack.
Oh, you're gonna get the Aunt Jemima treatment.
Right? Oh. Are you guys? No, but we're willing to try. Anyway, I have this real
focus, Roylance, focus.
All right, I have this real specific audition routine, and recently in the last few years, I've added another element of it, which is purely for adversity training, so that you don't get caught with your pants down at the wrong moment, and which happens all the time. You just start. So no matter what type of mental state you're in, you teach yourself to recover and come back to the center as quickly as possible. And so, like, I'll have these envelopes where people will pull out excerpt after excerpt after excerpt, and all of a sudden there's a surprise little piece they pull out. It says 40 push-ups or 40 jumping jacks, or run around the building, or your dog died, or something. So to get the heart rate up somehow. And then in the initial training, you time your recovery. So you give yourself 2 minutes to recover from that. And you try to always do those before the most hardest soft excerpts to play, the ones where you really need your breath control. So you get this thing, and then Mahler 1 comes up. Anyway, then you do your 50 jumping jacks, and then you sit down and you got 2 minutes to pull your heart rate down so it's not affecting your sound. The next time it comes up, you get 90 seconds. The next time 60, and so you can get to the point where you so that surprises are sort of manageable. I mean, you can't account for everything, but like you said, welcome it, expect it. It's going to happen.
Wow. Yesterday with Tom Houchin for the winning the audition, he talked about how very similar to what you said, where he was always focused on pitch, time, sound, musicality, and that he has since added the fifth thing, which is the mental game, which kind of layers, as he said, layers on top of all of that stuff, right? Which in terms of he spoke. He made the same point you did a little bit more eloquently than you just did, but it was just like you both made it really well. Where like that, the surprises, they're coming, right? And there is ways that you can prepare for that, such that all of the work that you do on those first four are still able to shine, and that the artist is able to come through, and the arches, as you say, as you said before, are able to come through. And yeah, I love that story. That's awesome. If you win this, your life will be a lot better than if you don't win this. It's like, now let's play some more tuba. Yeah, yikes. So speaking of yikes, our dear friend Jens Lindemann has been... I assumed that you knew Jens.
I've been having some chop problems lately.
He has. Mike's always got his pulse on his pulse on the finger of the brass community.
We were on a Zoom chat the other night. It was he and Mark Gould and Tom Rolfs, and I forget who else was on there, but we were all trying to help him. Mark Gould was particularly helpful.
He is always helpful. So Jens has been going through some chop problems for a number of years, and nothing's working. So we are wondering if someone as wise and as diverse and as a suspect as Maestro Ozawa would maybe say, that you would be able to provide some insights for him. So what are your thoughts for Jens?
Well, this didn't come from me, just so you know, but my suggestion is to take the trumpet mouthpiece, just pretend this is a trumpet mouthpiece, okay? And then take it to the ground, but it can't be any type of ground. It has to be gravel, but it has to be asphalt, but not new asphalt, preferably something that's around 8 to 12 years old. And it might be hard to find it in California. You may have to go to northern Colorado to get something that's seasoned right? So take it, and then you're going to take it and put it on the table, this is the road. Pretend this is the road, and you're just going to grind it. Grind it. Not very long, but just long enough till the temperature comes up a little bit on the rim of the mouthpiece, and that will probably it's called scoring. It's not has nothing to do with filming or anything like that. It's called scoring the rim of the mouthpiece to give yourself better grip. It tends to there might be a little bleeding at first, but generally you'll have great results, and he'll finally be able to get through the tune.
Hey, that's a good one right there.
That was a good one.
So I'm kind of curious why you have a tuba mouthpiece near your microwave.
But you never know.
I guess.
Any moment you have to buzz. These days, when motivation comes, it's rare.
And with the lack of gigs, if somebody walks into his kitchen to offer him a gig, there's equipment within arm's reach always. He's like, yes. What do you do? $5, 3 hours? Let's do this. Yeah.
He's got it stashed all over the house.
I'll even go fake play tuba at Boston College. I don't care. I just want to put on a collared shirt. So, yeah, there you go.
I've worn this 6 months.
Yeah, it was like a month in where I took my dress shoes and I put them at the back of I put them at the back of the closet, like all of my dress socks. Like this is a great note to end on. My dog now, when I put on when I put on pants, the dog stretches because she knows that she's about to get walked.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm so frequently not wearing pants that when I put on pants, the dog is like, it is time to poop now. So yeah.
You keep yourself in good shape, so that's a good thing to not wear pants, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's like
yeah.
I just don't really need to wear pants. Like, I
Right.
mean,
Well,
there's
that's the
no.
word in the street. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I don't need I don't want to. My
Not a
neighbors
hard
are
sell. Not a hard sell at all.
my neighbors are already used to me like occasionally walking the dog in a tuxedo. Not that I've touched that damn thing in 6 months, but
The dog?
well, yes. On that note, we are going to have Mike hang out. Yeah, that was well done.
That was a really good one.
We are going to have Mike hang out for a few more minutes to record the bonus episode, which, of course, airs the week after we talk to all of these wonderful artists as well as Mike. And we are going to hear a story from Lance, and then we will we're going to ask him, and we're going to tell him to be honest, like if he misses his section, and and if that's like a universal answer, or I played at NRO with Steve Lang. He's pretty hard to get along with, so I'm sure there's tension there. But anyway, we'll unpack. He's like the nicest human, which is why I pick on him. You don't ever pick on somebody who's going to fight back. That reeks of effort. So anyway, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. I'm so glad we were finally able to make it happen. And that is going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies.
You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram, and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.